Welcome to Exploring Sunday Scriptures on February the 8th, 2022. These are the scriptures that'll be heard this upcoming Sunday, the third installment in our series on the Song of Songs or the Song of Solomon, depending on the translation of the Bible. It can be called by either of those names. This is very erotic and steamy love poetry. So using it in some ways as to help this month warm up for us, a cold month of February as we're still deep in the winter. It's a very short book, particularly in the sense of what the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, offers in length of book. To have one that is just 8 chapters long is quite short. And it is part of what typically is made up of the wisdom literature, which includes Proverbs, Psalms, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Songs. So these are wise sayings or reflections from life. So far what we've had in the Song of Songs is first, as it begins, that initial attraction and lust, so the initial celebration of relationships or that sense of I don't want to say infatuation, but let's go ahead and go there. Infatuation that we have with another, where we just can't get enough of another person. This is related to our faith in the sense that this poetry becomes a way of understanding the depth of God's passion for us as well. A passion for all of us, including our physical makeup, which is not something that we often include in God's love to us and for us. We continued last week with a passage from the 4th chapter, which is part of the bridal procession and then ultimately the wedding and the consummation of that relationship. So we move from the initial beginning of the relationship to then a formative experience of that relationship in a commitment, a lifetime commitment. Again, this can be reflected in our connection with God to go from our first experiences or learnings about God to ultimately confirming our faith. So making that consummation of what we hold to be true and to allow that to inform our life, to be a critical part of our life from that day forward. So we now this week move to the 7th chapter before finally concluding in the last chapter of the Song of Songs. This 7th chapter, some scholars contend, is a continued reflection of the wedding or celebration of the beauty, particularly the bride in this case, from the wedding day. So part of the lifting of the veil and the celebration of not just some physical piece of the bride, but all of her makeup. And it is quite foreign or different sounding to us in how this is marked out or celebrated. I hear it slightly differently, and I'm sure scholars would contend against me, but some of what I hear in this is a celebration as that love has matured. So getting to a place where we can recognize even the flaws in the other as being that which we treasure most, if you will. So for me, this represents a way of seeing what we may look in the mirror and dislike about ourselves, and someone else looks upon us and sees how life has come to shape us, literally and figuratively, and what all of those things mean. So children or the experiences of life, the scars that are upon our bodies. And that too becomes a reflection, in this case, like God writing a poem to us to celebrate who we are and the life that we have lived and all of the experiences that lend to, that are formative to who we are. And so though we may struggle at times to really like ourselves, this becomes an expression of hearing how the depth of God's love for us, that God likes us, really likes us, particularly or in spite of those things that we may dislike. God sees those not as things to dislike, but things that are good with us. So The other thing to note from this, or in comparison of how this is with our faith as well as in our relationships, is there is a capacity in God, a capacity for love that is greater than any of the capacities that we have to love one another. And so this is the kind of capacity that can wrap us completely up, that really does treasure us fully and completely. It's a love that is pure and a love that it is eternal. So it doesn't ebb and flow, but is always there and always steady and completely pure in that. So God finds us, if we want to hear it this way, much more delightful than we might find God. And so this poem that we will hear, which may make us blush, if we hear it from the perspective of God, it's this way in which we may not delight in ourselves as much as God delights in us. And so we may have a harder time delighting in God as much because there isn't a God to look upon. Our God is formless, but also everywhere present. So present in one another and present in our relationships. So let me get into the readings. I have 3 translations to share with you today because, as I've said in the past, with just a single scripture, and this being all love poetry, I wanted to make sure that there was a little more to fill out our time. So I'm going to read the New Revised Standard Version as our first translation, which is the Bibles that are in the pews here at Christ Church. And usually where I begin my research for Sunday morning begins with the New Revised Standard Version before I might go to original language, in this case Hebrew, or other places. But this provides a very good, solid, word-for-word translation that's been smoothed out a little bit for the sake of English, for the sake of grammar, but stays very true or wedded to that original language. I'm then going to read from the New International Version, which is very similar but has small tweaks to it. Sometimes I think it captures the poetic nature of some passages better than the NRSV, which tries to stay close translation-wise to the original language. And I'm going to conclude with the Message, which is really a contemporizing of the passage, so a way of trying to update it and really make it grammatically more like what things sound like now. So this is a celebration. So get ready to blush, but this is a celebration of the body. In this case, it's the female body, but it's a celebration of the human body from head to toe. So try to hear it as that celebration. And while this is love poetry between a couple, this is also an expression of God's love for us, or a way that we can hear or understand that. So here's how it begins. First, from the toes. How graceful are your feet in sandals, O queenly maiden. Your rounded thighs are like jewels, the work of a master hand. Your navel is a rounded bowl that never lacks mixed wine. Your belly is a heap of wheat encircled with lilies. Your 2 breasts are like 2 fawns, twins of a gazelle. Your neck is like an ivory tower. Your eyes are pools in Heshbon by the gate of Bath Rabbim. Your nose is like a tower of Lebanon overlooking Damascus. Your head crowns you like Carmel, and your flowing locks are like purple. A king is held captive in the tresses. So you can hear there how we move from foot to head. We start with the feet, and how beautiful are your feet. And then we have things that I don't know that I would suggest saying to a person, but rounded thighs, the navel like a rounded bowl, and then on top of that, essentially what is being said, that the speaker wants to drink wine from, and the belly like a heap of wheat. Well, when I think of wheat piled up after it has been harvested, it's not what most people would celebrate about their belly. So this is not saying you are flat-bellied and your legs and thighs are ripping with muscles and so lean. This is really looking at things from a different perspective. And so what we might not like about ourselves, this is celebrating in some ways as an expression. And so when I think, for example, of a belly as a heap of wheat, I think that of how that marks out life, particularly if there has been pregnancy or childbearing, it changes the nature of the belly forever. And I say that, I know, as a male, and so obviously I do not experience that in the same way, but we could say also most men later in life lose the definition of their midsection and gain, the little spare tire around the middle. And so this is the same kind of celebration, if you will, of that. Most men won't say, oh yeah, I really like my spare tire. We move up from the belly, then to the chest, and celebrating that as well. And then the neck, the ivory tower, eyes, like the pools in Heshbon, the nose, and finally the head and the flowing locks like purple is like regality. It's trying to express the sense of the queenness. So this is really trying to say, I love you from head to toe. But in this case, it's I love you from toe to head, and let me tell you explicitly all of those places that I see and how I see them and why I celebrate them. Now let me share with you the New International Version, and I encourage you to try to hear where this is the same and where this is a little bit different. How beautiful your sandaled feet, O prince's daughter. So let me just use that first line. The first one was, how graceful are your feet in sandals. This one is, how beautiful your sandaled feet, O prince's daughter. So a little bit different. Your graceful legs are like jewels, the work of an artist's hand. Your navel is a rounded goblet that never lacks blended wine. Your waist is a mound of wheat encircled by lilies. Your breasts are like two fawns, like twin fawns of a gazelle. Your neck is like an ivory tower. Your eyes are the pools of Heshbon by the gate of Bath Rabbim. Your nose is like the tower of Lebanon looking toward Damascus. Your head crowns you like Mount Carmel. Your hair is like royal tapestry. The king is held captive by its tresses. So your beauty holds me captive. What I see holds me captive. So we had, instead of how graceful are your feet in sandals, how beautiful are your sandaled feet. So are they just beautiful when they are in sandals, or are we talking about what's in the sandals? Okay, beside that, we have then your rounded thighs are like jewels versus your graceful legs are like jewels. So the NIV, I think, has a slightly different tone, or makes it broader in a very good way, the work of an artist's hand. From there, we get very similar, I think, in the remainder of the passage comparatively to the NRSV. Perhaps the hair is one of the differences. Your hair is like royal tapestry instead of your head crowns you like Carmel, and your flowing locks are like purple. So there's the royalty or the regality that's intended in that original translation, that NRSV, and what it says in the original language. But it's trying to say it's as beautiful as an art piece, in an art piece that you'd only see among these royal, fantastic places or palaces. So let's go finally to the Message to hear one final version of this, to hear how this does it a little bit different. Shapely and graceful your sandaled feet, and queenly your movement. Your limbs are lithe and elegant, the work of a master artist. Your body is a chalice, wine-filled. Your skin is silken and tawny like a field of wheat touched by the breeze. Your breasts are like fawns, twins of a gazelle. Your neck is carved ivory, curved and slender. Your eyes are wells of light, deep with mystery. Quintessentially feminine. Your profile turns all heads, commanding attention. The feelings I get when I see the high mountain ranges, stirrings of desire, longings for the heights, remind me of you, and I'm spoiled for anyone else. So a very different take on it, but the intent is still very similar, which is to be captured by this beauty. We move from how beautiful are your sandaled feet, or how graceful are your feet in sandals, O queenly maiden, O princess daughter, to including and queenly your movement. So there is definitely a change in trying to establish or state that the movement is what is present here. And I think that's stretching it a bit. We also expand beyond the legs. So instead of moving from toe to head, we have your limbs. Well, when I hear limbs, I think of legs and arms. And so this certainly broadens that out. It includes that same piece of the work of a master artist. Your body is a chalice wine filled. So this goes beyond the navel to be more inclusive of the whole body. And then the bit about wheat, which is definitely the midsection in the two other translations here, tries to make that an expression of the color of the skin as well as its tension. So we have the skin is silken and tawny like a field of wheat touched by the breeze. So very different. Then from there, we kind of remain similar as far as from the chest up and what is said, a little bit different towards the end. So instead of having your nose like the Tower of Lebanon looking toward Damascus, your head crowns you like Mount Carmel, your hair is like a royal tapestry, the king is held captive by its tresses. We see your profile turns all heads. That's supposed to be your nose is like the Tower of Lebanon looking toward Damascus. Your profile turns all heads, commanding attention. And then we have the feelings I get when I see the high mountain ranges. So your head crowns you like Mount Carmel. That's what this is mirroring. The feelings I get when I see the high mountain ranges. Stirrings of desire, longings for the heights. Remind me of you, and I'm spoiled for anyone else, is the king is held captive by its tresses. So quite a bit different in that. And for me, and maybe this is just the biblical scholar in me, or the one particularly that was so heavily influenced by biblical languages in my studies, it goes too far, or it takes too many liberties. And so in doing that, I think it loses some of that. Yeah, it probably makes a little more sense to us in our contemporary grammar and language, but there's something to be spoken for the real sense that the passage moves us from foot to head. And in this translation, we lose that as it tries to universalize it quite a bit more. So just remember that while this is a celebration of human relationship, including in relationships, our physical connection and attraction to one another, this is also an expression of God's love for us. So I hope that you hear this passage not only as just erotic love poetry between human beings, but the depth of God's love for us. And when we really explore and understand that depth, it becomes much easier for us to understand the lengths that God went in the person of Jesus of Nazareth, Jesus Christ, to express that love and ultimately offer us salvation by that love. And how through Christ we are called ultimately to share that love, that same love with the world. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that the world might be saved through him. And now we become the hands and feet who express that love to the world. So one more to go after this to conclude this series on the Song of Songs. I hope this has been interesting to you, perhaps on a book that you really have never known was there or appreciated in any way, and has helped to warm up this cold time of the year. I look forward to exploring the final passage with you next week and proclaiming God's message to us this week, inspired by the Holy Spirit, the good Lord willing, on Sunday. So look forward to seeing you on Sunday in whatever way that you attend, online or in person, and ultimately then exploring our final passage and proclaiming that as well. God bless. Thanks for joining me.